So welcome to End-to-End Zero Trust Architecture. That is why we're here today. We want to welcome, this is truly one of the hottest topics that we have. We've done briefings on this before, so welcome to GovBrief and all of you folks that are here. Love the fact that you're here, and I did break out the NASA mug if you missed it earlier. Loving the web pictures. Are those awesome or what, guys? They're awesome. Those are some great photographs. So we appreciate you guys being here. This will be the best briefing ever when you registered. Sheila from the VA, a thorough explanation of what this is and why it's important. Kurt, love that one. I think we're going to try to do that, right, Charles?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're going to do our best. Mark from NASA, agencies could share where they are with developing their zero trust reference, enterprise, and solution architectures. Fantastic. We're going to do a little bit of that as well. Open it up. Elia, details on what should be part of ZTA and what shouldn't be. Love that. That's a great question. Barbara discusses the actual approaches for ZTA implementation and gives examples of implementations for all 5 pillars. Funny you should say that, Barbara, because one of the things we're going to talk about today are the pillars and the fact that sometimes there's 5, sometimes there's 6, sometimes there's 7 or more. And we'll get our heads around that a little bit as we talk about it. Right, Charles? We're not going to bend too many people's brains with that.
No, we're not going to hammer home any particular number of pillars.
But we will cover at least 5, right?
We'll cover at least 5.
At least 5. That's the most important thing. Gerald, I received the information before I retire. Gerald, if you're going to retire today, you'll still get it because it's happening right now. In fact, can you share that out now, Terry? I think it works in the chat. Oh, there we go. So you can pop the stuff in the chat for the handouts. And Anthenio, and is that right? Anthenino. Wow, that's awesome. From Census. I'd like to hear the tie-in and challenges of network micro-segmentation in zero trust. You go in there, Charles? Is that what we're talking about?
We can start to get into that when we start getting into some of the architecture slides. Yes.
Love it. All right, we'll do our best. And the best briefing ever. Carrie, there's interaction with the audience. Absolutely. We already did it. So we know things about you. Robert, it helps to enhance the understanding of identity management with public-facing net.gov systems. Absolutely on point, right? Right, Daniel?
Absolutely, yeah.
Absolutely on point. Guadalupe from FEMA. It improves the agency system. It darn sight better. Right, Charles?
You got it.
Yeah. Douglas from the VA provides the best approach for success. We'll talk about at least one of the directions that we have. Leon, real-world examples of planning implementation are discussed. Yes. Jacqueline from FEMA, we have a clear, concise understanding of how ZTA and ZT strategies can improve security and risk management. We'll talk about some of those high level anyway. Scott from USCIS, we can all stay in touch and share lessons learned, work together as we implement ZTA. We're actually we put that in specifically for you, Scott, at the end, because we're going to continue the conversation and we want to make sure anybody that wants to continue it is part of that process. Grace Marie, you can address the pitfalls of implementing zero trust in an environment with several different independent contracting units. I don't know, we're going to dive that deep, Charles, but at the very least, you can get together with Grace Marie and help her connect some dots. Does that sound good?
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
Sure thing.
All right. So please address, where's the real enforcement of system removal lie? The real enforcement of system removals lie if there's refusal to acknowledge or follow ZTA. Hey, guys, that's above our pay grade, I think. Is that above your pay grade, Charles?
It's a couple levels above.
Couple levels. I think that's presidential pay grade. So there you have it. Barbara from Census, top 5 lessons learned from implementing ZTA on a large scale compliance program. We'll give you a couple. Maybe you'll have those lessons learned. Hopefully we get to 5. Vincent, when and how we will be implemented with RCAF or top secret mainframe security package. Wow. What is that one? Anybody want to, are we going to touch that one today, or is that going to be a breakout?
I think that's a good breakout, specific to the IBM mainframe environment.
Yep, that's probably a breakout, Vincent. So take what you can get today and then make sure you continue the conversation. Darrell, zero trust examples. Absolutely. Douglas, top Top 10 impacts of ZTA on cloud migration efforts. I don't know. We're going to do a top 10 list, but you can start your list for top 10. I'll bet, Douglas. Leon, advice on planning for going ZTA for inventory asset RBOC. Are we going to take a stab on that one? Is that a breakout too, Charles?
We're going to take a stab at a majority of that today.
All right, fantastic. Scott, when starting from scratch, in what order should we implement ZTA components? Love that question. That's perfect, right? And then Jonathan from FEMA, how ZTA will be effective in our public agency disaster applicants. A very specific example, but we will go into how that will be effective. We will not, gents?
We have a very specific example to discuss about the implementation in this particular area. Absolutely.
In that area. Guess what, Jonathan? You're going to get exactly that answer. That's fantastic. Included in this are the session docs. Terry, can you pop them in there? Did that work for you? You can say no, right, for real live, if it's not, because we will get you those. The session docs will be the briefing presentation. We have the executive order of 14028. We also have the technology stack, which was pretty impressive with one of your meetings last week, I understand, gentlemen. You went in and showed them their own.
They were quite impressed.
And so, yeah, that was awesome. And if you want to talk about that in a little bit, I'd love to hear it. And we have a couple of the case studies that we're going to follow. We have the architecture and ZTA user authentication of what you guys do. And so briefing controls, if you've been living under a rock and you have no idea how Zoom works, can't imagine, but you can go up to the top and you can do the side-by-side mode thing and make us bigger, smaller. If you'd like to participate, it is easy. We will put the docs back down in this one here, and then we'll put the questions up over here. And then if you want to have like I got crazy bills going on. If you want to have a private dialogue, you can send it to dbeloche@resilient.com. And a real quick disclaimer, this event is not affiliated or endorsed by any agency. It's provided to audience for informational purposes only. GSA gave this to us way back when. And all participation is voluntary, and your engagement is not an indication or endorsement to purchase from any vendor, including Resilient. So now you can talk. We can actually do that engagement that we were looking for before. So why in the world did you decide to pop in today? Is it that you're trying to get your head around zero trust? Are you on the hot seat for ZTA implementation? Are you looking at ZTA to solve a current cyber issue or security issue? My boss made me come. There's got to be Weisenheimers out there, so you can pick as many as you want. So while we're doing that, I'm going to pop this other screen. Come on, you can do it. There we go. And we'll pop back to that in just a minute. We're going to get you cooking here. Pop this open while you're doing that. And we're going to talk about a little bit about the agenda of what you're about to partake in here. So what is zero trust? And how is it different from what you're currently doing? We have some examples of that. And most importantly is why it's important, right, gents? We gotta get this out as how this is important to the agencies and why this makes sense. And being able to separate the hype, because there's a little bit of hype, right? Just a little.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And what you should look for. Yep. A zero trust solution and real world examples. That's where we're going to go and get you there. Today's a little bit different because we're talking. One of the reasons why Resilient is here is because most of the time it's just education. We want to do the framework. The challenge is in this particular area, and we've had other zero trust briefings, is the end-to-end zero trust. And this is one of the examples that we're bringing. And we're talking about some intellectual property, some proprietary pieces of what they do. And as a result, we can't separate those into not looking at a particular product. So I hope you give a little bit of latitude to be able to say, hey, this is a way to solve the problem, And the reason why we have Resilient here is because they have a solution that they're working with that has real life examples that you're asking for. And it is end to end, which is something that has been very difficult. In fact, we hadn't seen it. We had a bunch of folks asking about that last time and actually challenging it. So this is why we're doing this briefing today, and we appreciate you guys joining us. So tell us a little bit about why we're here, a little bit about Resilient and how you guys got started.
Sure. A little bit of background. Back in 2012, we started out as Waverly Labs, and we were deeply involved in the whole development and concepts of SDP. Basically, we helped co-author the Cloud Security Alliance Software Defined Perimeter, SDP itself. And, SDP is truly the genesis of the Zero Trust network. We have been and continue to work with and collaborate with federal agencies like NIST, ATARC, the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center, as well as GITEC, the Government Information Technology Executive Council. We have also been involved with the Department of Homeland Security, won a SBIR program, and was a phase 2 awardee. We'll be getting into much more detail on this, as well as the actual implementation. So the challenges that we see with the current implementations and networks is that fixed network perimeters are no longer effective. Employees need to be able to have enterprise managed accounts accessing everything that they need to be able to do their jobs from any location. And these devices need to be consistently tracked and monitored. Our vision, and it's really just a foundation around end-to-end Zero Trust, is never trust and always verify. And you'll see as part of our architecture, we really ensure that the person attempting to try to gain access to the secure assets that you're trying to protect is not only the actual person, but is utilizing very secure Zero Trust components to be able to gain access to that very trusted source of data. The next generation digital identity, we have just recently trademarked and have come forward with a product called ID NFT, non-fungible token. And it's a digital anonymous representation of an individual. It's in the form of a hash, and we'll be getting into more details on that. But it's the foundation of being able to ensure the individual gaining access into the computer to be able to gain access into the network is actually the person that you want into your network. And we go through a lot of new technology to be able to ensure that.
And one of the things we talked about early on when I talked with Daniel about this, and is that we were talking about a healthcare example, right, Daniel? And you want to make sure that the patient is the patient and the doctor is the doctor, and there's some communication. We're talking about virtual healthcare and the scenario there. And one of the biggest challenges is yeah, they have access to, into the system in this particular place, but you want to make sure that patient's a patient, the doctor's actually legit, right? Isn't that one of the other things? Is both sides have to be validated, right? You still there, Daniel?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. And as Charles said earlier, we mentioned the ICANN, let's put it this way, that is the foundation of Zero Trust, and that's pretty much the way you would start the implementation of this kind of framework. Absolutely.
Love it. Yeah. Love it. All right. So let's talk about some of the facts that we have here and what's happening in order to better protect organizations, agencies, companies from cyber attacks. Tell us about this.
So, our view was, there needs to be a way to be able to protect, any entry point into a network, to be able to ensure the authentication of that user as well as the devices that they're coming in through. The facts are VPNs and firewalls are failing. Perimeters, based security solutions have a number of failure points. It's no longer sufficient to be able to verify once at the perimeter. It needs to be continually monitored who's coming in and from what device are they coming in from. As well as, logins are continually easily compromised. And I'm sure everybody is well aware that ransomware demands have only just continued to soar. So we look at these facts and the ability to be able to deal with it. And Daniel, I think you wanted to kind of
absolutely. So what you see here is the snapshot of the traditional IT architecture called perimeter-based security. So the core idea here is that anyone inside the corporate network is trusted and anyone outside isn't. So this has been the cybersecurity model, for the past 20 plus years. Right? So this model, this perimeter-based security, comes with layers of security solutions. So meaning that we kind of panning up, hardware and software. So I'm talking of firewalls, proxies, VPNs, NAC, network access controls, and so on. So the perimeter and layer approach makes sense when the network is almost entirely on premises and often Windows-based, right? And we can say that the outer layer would be the network perimeter itself with VPNs, firewalls, intrusion detection, and other security features. So when it comes to IP addresses, network locations, VPN, it's often, I would say, almost every time configured to allow excessive implicit trust, leaving enterprises at risk for attack. And we've seen that every single day. So cyber attacks have gone exponential, right? And that has highlighted many flaws. So we know this top 10 or whatever cyber attacks we can name: DDoS, phishing, man in the middle, and as Charles mentioned earlier, ransomware. Right? That's the worst at this time. Once the hacker is in, so he's going to use this what we call lateral movement to get in and to go access to other host applications and so on and so forth. Right. So, and as Charles mentioned as well, is now today's needs have changed. Right. We need to access the information anytime, anywhere, from any devices. And now it's also mostly or exclusively cloud-based environments. Okay?
And that's where the government is going, right? That's one of the biggest things, doing FedRAMP and all the rest of the pieces to drive things to the cloud. So we have to approach this differently, don't we?
Absolutely, yeah.
And one of the questions we asked at the beginning of the agenda, what's the weakest link in Zero Trust? Well, the weakest link in Zero Trust, in a Zero Trust network, is the user itself. And
there's doggone users.
Yeah, but you need to be able to have a solution around the user in order to be able to ensure their particular identity. So I guess that kind of leads into our next.
Yep.
slide.
I learned something in one of the other briefings. A picnic area. Do you know what a picnic area is?
I'm afraid of that. Go ahead.
A picnic area. A problem in the chair, not in the computer. That's exactly what you're saying, Charles.
Yeah.
I'll be here all week.
But that's what the analysts say as well. If you look at the Gartner, they're going to tell you it's like between 78, 80, 85%, whatever, cyber attacks, coming from the end users. It is what it is, right? So.
And it's not going to change. There's no way you're going to change it. So you got to figure out a way, a different methodology, and hence why we got to a place where the president is pushing from, I mean, it doesn't get any better than that, right? The president says, hey, you got to do it. And agencies coming up with how we're going to do it, right? So, and you're talking about trust zones. You're going to introduce this trust zone piece. I love this, by the way. We were creating this and looking and reviewing this with you. I love what you have as far as how you're approaching this, and I want to get feedback from everybody here as well as to how this applies. So go ahead and take us through your model of what it should look like and what you guys are doing.
So the true end-to-end zero trust, and you can't really have zero trust without defining both endpoints and everything in between. But it needs to include a very strong identity credential access management capability, ICAM, and the ability to be able to create zero trust zones around those specific assets that you want to be able to provide the highest level of security within your organization. Zero trust solution must be able to address everything from the end user all the way out to the data. And you need to be able to define who has access to what data, what systems, when, where, and how. The mantra of never trust, but always verify before granting access is certainly the capability that we're promoting here. And it is not trust but verify. That has just continually failed. Zero trust zones enable you to be able to cloak the sensitive applications so that they are not able to be seen at all from the network or from the internet. It's a security framework for being able to protect your critical applications and assets, and only truly authorized, verified end users are permitted access to the protected applications. It prevents DDoS attacks, ransomware, and other malicious attacks as well.
And this is what we were talking about earlier. So tell us about what this is and what happened last week. You had a great story last week too. So
so this is actually the way the government's working group, the way they've broken down zero trust, because zero trust, of course, is a big challenge. It's a big problem. So as usual, when you have a big problem, right, you want to break it down in smaller problems that you can address in an easy way, right? So I would say officially they've broken down in 7 pillars, right? But the thing is, and I guess many in the audience know that there's no standard around zero trust. That's why, it's always complicated, for the market to understand what zero trust is and where do we start, how would you implement the solution, and so on and so forth. Because on one end, you're going to have the vendors coming up with a story. On the other hand, you're going to have this regulatory entity or non-regulatory entities like the NIST, for instance, trying to help you guys, writing up guidelines, implementation, and so on and so forth. But in between, there's a gap that is not filled up. That's why it's complicated, and everyone got confused, about this framework. Okay, so let me step back a bit and give you a bit of history about zero trust, and especially what Charles mentioned earlier, SDP, that stands for Software Defined Perimeter. So this work started with DoD, the Department of Defense, and within DISA, that's the cybersecurity unit within DoD. They started this work in 2007. So this is not new, right? Then CSA, the Cloud Security Alliance, which is a group of security experts, started to develop the open source SDP. And that was in 2010. And as Charles said, we co-author, this development of this open source, right? So just to mention this story, because it's not from yesterday. I know that this is a hype, behind it and so on and so forth, but it's been in the making for a long time. Okay. So what you see here, again, that's a very detailed framework, and that's something that you can rely on when you want to select a vendors, right? So as Dave said earlier, pillars go from 4, 5 to 7 and more. But what you want to see every time is the first 4 pillars. That's the core of zero trust, right? So we're talking about the user, the device, the network, and the application. Sometimes the application are split in 2, applications and data. The rest, most of the time on the right, are more the pillars to help the framework to work. So we talk of monitoring, visibility, analytics, orchestration, and so on and so forth, right? That's more like the internal pillars, again, to make it work. The key point, again, is the ICAM piece. That's the 2 first pillars. So to answer the questions, where do I start? What is the foundation of zero trust? We can state, right? That's the 2 pillars, the user and the device.
Awesome.
Okay.
So we do have a question here from Robert Willis. I think this actually applies to something you just said, is why would we use a commercial solution in this digital identity domain when open source international standards are available? And you guys actually helped with those standards. Is that what I heard?
Yeah. So the thing is, I mean, with this instance of SDP, this group of security experts started to develop an embedded source like many other technologies, by the way. But at some point, you're going to have, vendors stepping in and then creating an instance of this framework, right? And then, of course, to the vendors, you're going to have support, you're going to have connectors, because the thing is, when it comes to SDP and zero trust, it's an API-based implementation. It's not a plug-and-play solution, right? So it takes some efforts and understanding to put it in place.
That's right. And you guys have had a great meeting last week with one of the agencies. I really appreciate that. We can talk about that later. But you broke that down and put data as a pillar. It's now down below because everything's running on data anyway, right? That's why you did that.
Yeah, absolutely. So on our end, we've decided, to break it down in 5 pillars. Okay, but again, the 6 pillars. Sorry, but the 4 first pillars are the key, to the zero trust framework. And again, users, device, network, and application. And of course, all of this is to protect the data. Keep in mind that it's not I would say a collection of software like VPN, firewalls, and things like that we shuffled around, and then we decided that to make it a zero trust solution, right? So we followed the SDP specifications, and it goes through a set of principles. So for instance, less privileges, meaning that never trust, always verify. Cloak the servers, meaning that you can't attack what you can't see. Mm-hmm. Micro-segmentation, this is where we create dynamically trusted zones. The last one, but not the least, authenticate first and connect second. When I say that, most of the time people are like, well, but when I connect my bank account online, that's what I do all the time. I enter my login and my password. Well, when you do that, you already launch the application, and that's the application asking you to enter your credentials. So here, what we're talking here, there's a real mechanism where behind the scene, there's the device identifying the zero trust framework and vice versa. And then you are asked, once the application is launched to enter your credentials, right? So behind the scene, there's some sort of complexity to match those principles. Okay.
So, and this is what we're going to be talking about. So you just nailed that. And that is before anything happens where you have access to the protected application asset, right? You can't even see it. That the asset doesn't trigger anything. It actually goes to your controller. So walk us through this real quick.
And the thing is, so before Charles, you start with this slide. In any solution that you want to put in place, you got to follow two rules. I mean, to me, that's golden rules. First off, it has to be user-friendly, meaning that frictionless for the end user, or as frictionless as possible. Otherwise, that's going to be rejected. And same thing with the IT staff, right? You want a seamless integration. That's key. That's why we've tried to work on that as well. If it's too complicated, there's no way that's going to work out, right?
And so your process is go ahead. What are you going to say, Charles?
I was going to say that Daniel was right on, and I was just going to lead into what we have. What you're looking at here is an example of a true end-to-end zero trust architecture. What we have, as you see on the lower left-hand side of the screen, is a cell phone that the user uses initially to onboard themselves into onto the application itself. But the onboarding really requires a ability to be able to utilize a government ID, as well as being able to take a selfie of the individual in order to match that person's face. And we utilize a number of technologies to be able to test for liveness and so forth, to be able to ensure that individual is the same individual that is providing the government ID, and that government ID is then analyzed for authentication itself. But that information is pulled together. Certain characteristics, facial characteristics, are pulled together with the UUID of the cell phone, as well as the end user device. Possibly, if we were needing to be able to do location for identification as well. But that's all being pulled together into a very unique, through an algorithm, into a very unique hash that we refer to as ID NFT. That ID NFT is then stored in a private blockchain that can be both as a government private blockchain, or it could be stored in the Google Cloud or AWS, wherever it needs to be stored for the agency. But the access on the front end needs to be verified so that we truly understand who that user is that's trying to access into the system itself. So we have absolute proof that user is valid, that they are who they say they are, and they will then be able to gain access to the device, the end user device. That end user device will then send a SPA packet containing the unique information from the ID NFT, as well as unique information about that end user device, through into the gateway, utilizing a SPA packet, a single packet authorization that's only recognized by a zero trust gateway, which is a denial gateway, which then will go and communicate with the controller, talk with the enterprise directory or service directory to understand what resources the individual is supposed to gain access to. And then that information will then be sent back to the user device to then be enable that end user to be able to create a data plane, or Resilient creates a data plane of communication to be able to communicate directly with the protected application or asset in the trust zone that they've been allowed access to. So that's kind of an overview of the Resilient end-to-end zero trust. And if we go to the next slide, really going into detail on the onboarding process, because it's extremely important. The user will take a picture of a government ID. It can be a driver's license, a passport, a company ID, or an agency ID, but it has to have a physical picture of the individual on that government ID. Once that government ID has been tested against a database of over 10,500 documents for authenticity, the user will then take a selfie to be able to validate the individual, and that selfie will ensure liveness. A liveness test is applied. The liveness ensures that the person is not using any type of picture or any type of faking technology to be able to match the government picture. And we've been certified by a number of labs, iBeta-1. We've passed both iBeta-1 and iBeta-2 tests for liveness, so that once that individual has been verified against the government ID, they match. They will then be determined that they are actually the real person to be able to gain access into that user. As I mentioned earlier, we extract the UUID out of the cell phone, which is 128-bit user information. And then we also use the device being used to onboard, along with other key characteristics, as I mentioned, from the government document, like the state, the city, maybe a family name, as well as the individual's facial characteristics, eyes, nose, etc. And they're all run through an algorithm that creates a very unique string, which is hashed using SHA-256 for our technological individuals here. And that hash, as we've identified here, is known as an ID NFT, a non-fungible token. We call it a non-fungible token because we share very much the characteristics of NFTs. It's unforgeable, it's unique, it's indivisible, and it's interoperable. This ID NFT, as I mentioned earlier, will then be stored in the private blockchain for further future identification purposes. That ID can be utilized not only for this one application, but could be utilized for accessing buildings, could be used for accessing other types of systems that the user would need to be able to gain access to.
Fantastic. And there's a couple different things about what you have here with ID NFT. There's two different certifications that are out there to date, right? Is that what I'm reading here? Absolutely.
The Resilient ID NFT has been certified by a lab called iBeta Labs. It's passed both level 1 and level 2 certifications. and there's something referred to as a presentation attack detection. And they ran a total number of attacks of 1,500. And our success rate, or the success rate, was 0, which means nobody was able to fake the ID NFT solution through this particular test.
And it's funny you say that, because David asked the question, could I use my government agency issued ID to onboard and verify myself? And the answer would be,
well, the answer is yes, you would use your government ID, but you would have to be able to also take a selfie. That selfie ensures that you are not only live, we provide a liveness test through that software, but we also ensure that that picture is the individual that was taken in the picture of the government ID as well.
I love that.
The other thing, Dave, what's important, especially when it comes to identity, one of the first question is, but where my data goes, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to know my, driving license going to the cloud or private cloud or thing like that, right? And we don't do that. So your driving license stays on your smartphone. It's only the hash of it. So we create the hash. Okay.
Awesome. So just a real quick overview, because we got to get into your case studies. So onboarding, user verification, you mentioned it already, Charles.
We've gone through that. It's a one-time onboarding process, takes less than 30 seconds. No personal information is uploaded to any server. The only thing that we create, which is a hash of that person of the personal information, that hash is then stored in the private government blockchain that we would use further on or in the future to be able to provide verification of the individual trying to gain access a second time or a third time.
And it doesn't matter what device it is, because you have the ability to cross over different devices and validate that person still is that.
Yes, this can be cell phones, laptops, desktops, iPads, as well as this can be done online, offline. It can be done in person as well as over the phone. So the verification process utilizes multiple different ways of being able to address the different needs that you have for authentication. And
you just said this, online or over the phone. So if your agency systems, you have your resilient ID. And again, for those folks, normally when we do this, it's educational, but we're talking about a specific product that doesn't exist anywhere else. So you're going to have to give us a little latitude as we talk about this, because this is product-based. And that's not normal for us, but we're doing it specifically because it is literally, you have 2 certifications, different organizations, and your NIST framework, all that stuff is really unique here. So let's take a look at what you have. You have the online or over the phone. And so we talked about the first 2 pillars, right? And this gives us the rest of the pillars, because before you even get to a place where you can touch any of the systems, it validates that you are who you say you are, which is exactly what we're looking for, right? No trust until you validate you are who you say you are, and then validate that the system is what you're supposed to be talking to, right?
Exactly,
That's
Dave.
Fantastic.
And that first part is critical to be able to take this next step, which is really, creating the trust zones, being able to ensure that the person coming in through that end user device, utilizing a SPA packet that can only be recognized by a denial gateway, a zero trust gateway, can then gain access into the resilient trust zone for the access into the application, the protected asset that you're trying to ensure is only accessible from a user that has been validated as strongly as we have shown here.
I love it. Hang on a second. We're going to take a real quick. I'm going to make sure we open up the questions first things, but let's ask him this. Where are you on your ZTA journey? Just gathering info and getting educated, developing requirements, budget allocated. You can choose as many as you want. And you may choose budget allocated and RFI, RFP is hit the street, active proof of concept stage, implementing certain systems, or we're going to tell if there's anybody with Pinocchio syndrome. Total ZTA implementation complete. Just saying, don't click that one. Because I don't know that there's anybody out there that's that way. I haven't heard anybody talk about it to say, oh, we got it all. So there you go. But we appreciate this. So let's start talking about use cases, because we're going to go down into a couple of things for us. But let's talk about this at a high level first and walk them through this while they're answering this, where they are on the journey.
Yeah,
and we'll answer any other questions that pop.
So this is not an exhaustive list of use cases, but I would say that's pretty much the top ones that we've seen. Charles, presented this onboarding public users and enterprise. So basically creating your digital ID, and you start within the blockchain and so on and so forth. It's a very quick process, to create your digital ID, and very secure when it comes to access application, right? Let me see what I can detail as well. So yeah, in terms of identity verification, so it's online, by phone, and also face-to-face. So we see that through the DHS ICAM on the fly use case. I saw at the very beginning, Dave, that you, I think there's someone asking about cloud security and migration.
Mm-hmm.
So I might be the top one, actually, because we know that cloud environments are very dynamic by nature. So you need to update access when you got new servers instances and so on and so forth. And you want all, of course, all these cloud servers, protected, right? And based on architecture, you're going to have to make it sure the controller checking the access and the gateway in front of each private cloud.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen also in DevOps environment where it's also quite complicated. So when it comes to development, you always have different labs for development, for tests, for pre-production, and so on and so forth. So you have developers that must access different ports, protocols, and constantly, changing resources. So you want that to secure, this development platform, but also they want to implement, this Zero Trust framework in their applications, meaning that they want a security-ready network application. Also in the roadmap, so now we're talking a lot about IoT and things like that. So we do have that in the roadmap, and especially to the smart grid, for instance, these are very sensitive environments and not protected at all. So there's a bunch also of features that we are in the process of developing. Yeah.
Awesome. So we do have a question. Does the liveness test meet two-factor authentication requirements?
It's much better than two-factor authentication. It's two-factor is having after you've logged in, it will send a message back to your cell phone to verify yourself. There's no verification of that user is actually that user. Every time somebody with this solution, with this mechanism called ID NFT, you have to take a selfie in order to validate you are who you are. And that validation goes against the information that was previously onboarded, that was encrypted on your cell phone, whether the government ID. That's all done locally on that cell phone. But that user is necessary to be the actual individual trying to gain access into that system. So Two-factor authentication is not going to be able to do that for you. Somebody could steal a cell phone and attempt to try to gain access in and be able to have that.
You gain access to the cell phone, which has the email, which has the validation for the two-factor authentication. You just busted the two-factor authentication. And speaking of that, which is interesting because you're using live, right? So Leon asked a great question, by the way. I want to hear the answer to this. What about variability in personal appearance, hairstyle, facial hair, all that kind of thing, aging, weight loss, illness? How big of a risk is it that a valid user gets locked out of their system because they aren't recognized visually? Great question, Leon.
Well, the technology that we're utilizing has been proven. You can be wearing glasses or not glasses. There are certain age variations that are not going to have any effect, or facial hair. There are tolerances that our system will be able to ensure because of the type of analysis that's being done of the face itself.
Yep.
Certain characteristics don't change.
That's a fact.
And we also score the verification, see what I mean? Because it's never or rarely 100%, right? So we score the verification, and then that's the application deciding if the person can access or not.
Got it. All right, guys, we're running out of time, so I want to make sure we get to your case studies and work on that. We have a couple of other questions. We promise we'll get to those. And anybody that we don't get to, we'll make sure that we get a response. There is one question. Will the presentation be made available after? It's actually made available right now. So you just go to the chat and you can go and access that, and it's made available, and it will be made available after as well. So current implementations of interest today, U.S. Department of Homeland Security, and closely tied with that is Texas A&M, one of the coolest things. I don't know if you've ever been there. We'll talk about that maybe in a minute if we get a chance. But tell us about what happened with DHS.
So yes, so we got awarded by their SBIR program that stands for Small Business Innovation Research. It's a very competitive program, and you got lucky, to get this award. And the subject was ICAM on the fly. So this was an application dedicated to the first responders community. So to make it short, since 2016, extreme events, went crazy. I'm talking about tornadoes, hurricanes, mass shooting, flooding, and so on and so forth. So meaning that states, jurisdictions, counties, cities cannot maintain the resource level to address these events, meaning that when it happens, they have to call first responders from other states or jurisdictions. And issues happen. So for instance, during the Hurricane Katrina, you had looters showing up with fake IDs, even with fake vehicles. And once let in, they would loot the place, right? Mass shooting, for instance, you have, I would say, good Samaritans, officers, but they are not on duty. They're not wearing their uniform, unmarked vehicles, and they come to the scene and they shoot at each other, right? Or sometimes for tornadoes or hurricanes, you have volunteers or legit first responders, but with the wrong certifications, right? Let's say you have a chemical fire, but this is a wildfire. See what I mean? So it puts their lives in danger, and the other first responders' lives in danger. So meaning that for this application, the incident commander wants to be sure that the other first responders coming in are the real person they pretend to be, and then they can access sensitive data. So we're talking about operational data, we're talking about law enforcement data, citizens data, and so on and so forth. So the application was really to verify face-to-face the identity of these first responders, and then let them access the IT systems. Right?
Yep. And you did this also, so in Texas and Tennessee, but you also work with Texas A&M. And I don't know, just real quick, if you haven't seen what happens in Disaster City, coolest place I've ever been. It is one of the coolest places.
Yeah.
Texas A&M put stuff on fire. They have trains piled on each other, planes that catch on fire. You got to pull people out of the rubble. It's awesome. So anyway.
Yeah, they simulate a bunch of it's a training facility basically for first responders, and they simulate a bunch of catastrophes, like again a hurricane or shipwreck, train wreck. It's crazy. I mean, I went there last May. That was unbelievable. So yeah, we've implemented as well our solution for the first responders coming in and having a look at this application. Yeah, but that's an amazing place.
I got one for you because this is amazing. So Jenny pulled this up. Has a question: with reversal of using facial recognition of login.gov and ID Me, are you looking at alternative? The statement was part of the stand down of ID Me because the use of facial recognition for government systems, because it can show wildly different accuracy levels based on factors such as quality of the camera, the color of the person's skin. We've been talking about this.
Boom, exactly. Yeah.
This is an elephant in the room, ladies and gentlemen, that's about to get out.
Yeah,
and everybody wants to see it.
Yeah, I didn't want to mention, this use case, but I mean, for those going to the IRS website, they know, I would say, first of the complexity, of the process just to get onboarded. And then when it doesn't work, you have to talk with what they call a trusted referee, to validate manually your identity. That's the first issue. The second one is that I think early in February, there's a commissioner saying that, well, I don't want taxpayers' data in a private cloud. There's no way that's going to happen. Right. So there's some issues there. Absolutely. So we kind of, but we have a totally different approach. Right. But thank you for that. Right.
And what the elephant in the room deals with disparity, especially racial disparity of, and that is going to be an issue that is coming, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
And we will absolutely get there. So
we address that. Absolutely.
Well, we do address that.
Yeah, you do address that.
We've been tested by an accredited NIST lab for facial liveness bias, and we've been confirmed for being able to exhibit fairness in terms of any target demographic groups, including gender, age, and race.
And that's coming up, ladies and gentlemen, because before you know it, that's going to be a big deal. So we want to make sure everybody gets out of here. We'll answer any questions we can. We'll stick around for a little bit, but I'd like to continue the conversations, meeting the president's memorandum if you have issues with that, including in the next briefing. This is important. A lot of folks ask this coming in. Hey, how can we be included? Definitely click that if you want to be included. Proof of concept. That's one of the pieces that we're going to be talking about, because guess what? If you can prove the concept in your agency, that's what DHS has been doing. And that's why we're doing this right now, because the proof of concept is already in play. So if you're interested in that, please schedule a presentation with your team. Love that idea. I know that Resilient would love that. Or please contact me with something else. And when do you want to do it? Immediately, next 30 days. Guess what? If we're going to try to do it in this fiscal year, you know what time you got. That's what you got. So, and then if it's for next year, that's okay too. So we'll make sure we keep you included in that. David Morris is asking, how is a trust zone created? Can you answer that one? You want me to go back to any particular slides or anything? I just want to talk about it. So how do you create it?
Well, a trust zone is created through an admin application that enables the administrator to be able to identify what gateway the user is going to be coming in through, and what trust zone the user is going to be able to gain access to. Mm-hmm. So once that information is then maintained within the Zero Trust controller, the user will then be able to, once validated for access into the system, that controller will be able to determine that that user is now validated to be able to gain access to that trust zone. And trust zones are easily created. You can have multiple trust zones per gateway. You can have multiple gateways per controller. The configuration capabilities are nearly endless, and giving you lots of flexibility for the type of environment that you need to be able to secure.
Yeah, and it goes, once you get in, you have different levels, but just being able to gain access, love it. So yeah, we'll keep this poll open for just another couple of seconds. Barbara had to drop. Sorry about that, Barbara. Awesome. Sharon says, awesome presentation. Steven says, good job. So there you have it. We appreciate that very much. Any other questions? I know we do have a few breakouts that we had earlier about the please addresses. So we'll break those out for folks that, especially some of the folks that had some of the more serious questions. And if you want, so you know what's happening, by the end of the day, you'll get a briefing presentation, links to the session docs, link to the video, one-on-one with agency sessions, talking about continuing the conversation. And with that, we want to say thank you very much. Sorry, we went over by 4 minutes, but great stuff, guys. This is one of the coolest things. And the fact that you did it in one of the coolest places with Texas A&M, Disaster City, is another thing.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
If you have no idea what I'm talking about, it is cool. So we'll make sure that we get the conversation going with you guys. But thank you very much. Beulah says, great presentation. You are welcome. You can come back, Beulah, just because you said so many nice things. Awesome. You're welcome, Renee, and Jonathan as well. POI, I'm not sure what that means. Does anybody know what that means? PPI. Oh, PPI. So PPI, want to address that?
I'm not sure what this stands for.
PII is personal identifiable information.
PPI.
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure. Yeah, Jonathan, if you got anything you want to throw out there, let me know. We can even unmutify you if you want, and you can chat. All right. So we'll give you another 5 seconds for continue the conversation. 4, 3, 2, 1, and boom.
Thank you.
So you got those. We'll make sure that you get what you need, and we'll be able to continue that conversation. Great job, guys. Tough subject to try to cover in an hour, obviously, especially when you start talking about end-to-end. But great way to be able to break the ice. Congratulations on this SBIR. That's not an easy thing to do. Congratulations again on DHS. Huge. The fact that you have implementation of DHS and the security functionality, and you guys have been at it for a long time, and it shows. It shows. Good stuff. So Charles, great stuff, man.
Thank you, Dave.
Yeah,
appreciate
awesome.
being able to present here today.
I love it. And let's see, any last ones? Great presentation. Love that. Okay, fantastic. We're gonna let everybody out of here. Follow-ups are coming, and you'll have those by close of business today, along with the video, and we'll polish it up a little bit and send another one out if you want to share it with your colleagues. Spread the word, because this is important stuff. So again, thanks for joining us and taking the time today, because we know you got plenty of things to do, and appreciate that you joined us for this. So thanks, guys.